Then a mighty king shall arise. I should really stop there because that's predominantly what I'm going to talk about. Who shall rule with great dominion and do as he wills. And as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the four winds of heaven, but not to his posterity, nor according to the authority which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up and go to others besides these. That should raise your curiosity. So last week, Mark Steen, when he was still awake, can't remember if it was at the beginning or the end of the study, asked if I had heard of what Josephus wrote concerning Alexander the Great and the temple in Jerusalem. And I had not. But this very passage, then a mighty king shall arise and his kingdom broken up, fits exactly with Mark's question last week. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time walking through Josephus, Flavius Josephus, who is I would call him a Roman Jewish historian. So he's after the time of Jesus, but he's citing earlier church historians as he's putting together two of his largest works. One is called Jewish Wars, and the other one is called The Antiquities of the Jews. And so what we're going to look at tonight is from Antiquities of the Jews, and he's focusing on this particular passage. And as I read through the whole text, I got really excited about it. Now, having said all this, I have to be transparent and say there are scholars out there who say, yeah, what Josephus is telling us, it didn't really happen. That couldn't have happened. That's so far-fetched, there's no way in the world it could possibly happen. And my response is, au contraire. Sometimes life is stranger than fiction. And what is driving a lot of those perceptions, I believe, are those who are saying that the book of Daniel is not really a prophetic book. It is actually a rewritten piece of history portrayed as prophecy. And last week we talked about it, why I think that they are not correct. I don't think they're correct because if you wanted to dazzle people with what a great prophet Daniel was, you would give even more details than what is in the prophetic utterances right now. And what is in there right now is overwhelming as far as its preciseness in describing the end of the Persians and the rise of the Greeks, and the breaking up of Alexander the Great's kingdom as well. However, that prophecy could have had names, could have identified, locations, it could have done all kinds of stuff, and it's not there. So it is, how do I want to say this? It is transparently oblique. Know what I mean? It's got some amazing clarity to it, but it's not as clear as it could be if it was written in the context that a lot of scholars are saying that it was written in, meaning after the events that unfolded. So I believe that Daniel is a real prophecy, happened in Babylon and then later Persia, and depicted events that were yet to come. So that's me. You look like you're poised to say something. The mic's on? Okay. He's got a dead one up here.
Anyway, there's a lot of archaeology evidence that shows, backs up. Even a copy was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and there's the Elephantine papyri. They found tons of stuff to back this up, and to also show that it was written at the date they said, because there's a lot of people like to say.
Right, I think it was much later.
200.
Right. or even 150. Yeah. Yeah. So here we go. This is Flavius Josephus. And it's a long text, so get comfortable. But I'm going to break the text up and kind of describe stuff, because if I just read it to you, when I read it the first time, I'm like, I don't know who this is. I don't know where this is. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening. So I'm going to try to explain things as it's unfolding. And it itself will dovetail with the book of Daniel, which when that happened, I just almost started doing a little dance. But anyway, I won't do the dance because I already got it out of my system. So here we go. This is Flavius Josephus. About this time, it was that Darius, so I highlighted Darius because I'm like, wait a second. We were talking about Xerxes, who was the son of Darius the Great, and we already talked about him because he's the guy that fought in the Battle of 300 against Leonidas, who came before Alexander the Great. So how can we have Darius doing this? Anybody want to make a guess? We've got our fourth Darius, and we haven't even run into the third Darius yet. So this is Darius the third that we're talking about, okay? And I'll show you this in a second, and I better get my pointer, because I'm going to need my pointer, Al, that you said I need, and I definitely will need this here in a second. I hope I don't have the battery run down. Okay, good, there we go. So Darius heard how Alexander, so this is Alexander the Great, had passed over the Hellespont and had beaten his lieutenants in the battle at Granicum and was proceeding farther. Whereupon he gathered together an army of horse and foot, determined that he would meet the Macedonians before they could assault and conquer all of Asia. So I found this handy-dandy little chart to clear all this up. Yeah, right? I've got to even get closer here. So right here is Alexander the Great. So this is a Macedonian empire. And this blue stuff here is the Persian Empire. So right up here, let me see. I want to go, I'll start with Cyrus the Great, or Cyrus the Second, because he actually was named after his grandfather, who was Cyrus. Then he had these two sons, Cambius II, remember him? And by the way, I need to make a disclaimer. Cambius II's mother, I said, was a piece of work. And I don't know where I got the information, but she was okay. I had her poisoning all these people, and then I started doing further research, and I couldn't find what I found to begin with, and I found nothing after that was saying she was poisoning anybody. So I need to owe this lady an apology, that she's just fine. She was a sweetheart. There, I got that out of my system. So here's Cambius II, and then he had a brother, half-brother, or either a half-brother or a full brother. If it was his brother, you remember that they think that maybe Cambius killed him, and then a guy came in to act like it was him. So we don't know if this is him or not. But then Darius the Great, not to be confused with Darius the Mede that we had earlier, seizes power, and then he ends up marrying a bunch of Cyrus and Cambius II's daughters and wives, and give himself legitimacy, right? So then Xerxes, he went up against the Greeks, but not Alexander the Great. And then we trickle all the way down to here. Well, right here is Darius II, and down here is Darius III. So this Darius III is the one that we're talking about, that Josephus is mentioning, and we're just supposed to know that, okay? Your Greek and Persian history is just supposed to be so on target, you don't even need to know if it's Darius the Great or Darius the Second or Darius the Third. Mine is not that sharp, so I got to tell you, it was Darius the Third. So they ended up fighting at a place called Hellespont, and here is a big fat arrow pointing to this area. This is kind of the area of Hellespont right here, and where it's talking about the battle at Granicum. Granicum is a river, and this is the Granicum River right here. So the first battle that Darius III entered into to try to keep Alexander the Great stuck up here was fought here, trying to keep them from coming all the way into Asia. It says, so he passed over the river Euphrates, came over Taurus, the Sicilian mountain, and at Isius of Sicilia, he waited for the enemy, meaning Alexander the Great, as ready there to give him battle. Okay? So he lost a battle, his lieutenants lost a battle up at Hellespont, and now Darius is coming and setting himself up in Cilicia, trying to stop Alexander. Upon which Sanballat, we'll look at him a little bit, was glad that Darius was come down, told Manasseh that he would suddenly perform his promises to him, and this as soon as ever Darius should come back. So, it said Darius crossed the Euphrates River. Here's the Euphrates. So he's coming from down in here, crossed the Euphrates, and he's setting up right here because Alexander is coming down through here. And he's going to try to stop him before he comes across and begins to capture Asia and Africa. Mentions this guy by the name of Sanballat or Sanballat. Sanballat, according to Josephus, he's excited that Darius is come down because he wants to, stop Alexander the Great as well. So I thought, who is this guy? So I found a Jewish archaeologist by the name of Yitzhak Magen, and he says Sanballat appears to have been the scion of a veteran Samaritan family. So he was kind of the godfather of a Samaritan family. So he's up north, originating from a town called Horon, not to be confused with Haran, perhaps to be identified with the village of Huwara at the foot of Mount Gerizim. So Mount Gerizim is where the Samaritans end up setting up their temple. If you remember back to the book of Judges, we talked about that a little bit. In Magen's reconstruction, he was a commander of a garrison force who rose to be appointed governor of Samaria, the first of the Israelites to achieve this rank sometimes prior to Nehemiah's return from exile and arrival in Judea in 444 BCE. In order to reunite Samaria and its populations, he thought a sacred site was necessary. The Levite priesthood had migrated to Judea, down south, around Jerusalem, and the priests of Baal were idolatrous, so this guy didn't want anything to do with them. So he chose from tradition Mount Gerizim, over whose site he chose a high priest from a noble family in Jerusalem, a grandson of Elishib, to preside and to whom he gave his own daughter in marriage. So if you remember Jesus and his conversation with the Samaritan woman at the well, here we go. She said, we've been taught to worship on this mountain. Well, what mountain she's talking about? Mount Gerizim. And they end up building a temple on the top of Mount Gerizim. And you Jews, you're down in Jerusalem. So where are we supposed to worship? So here's the kind of the historical background to that conversation. He established a temple to Yahweh on Mount Gerizim, over which his own descendants, as born into priestly blood, could minister. Josephus, same Josephus we're talking about, describes his construction of the Samaritan temple and says it was based on a copy of the Jerusalem temple. So if you recall, Cyrus sent people from Babylon back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple and to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. When they got there, there was a group of people who said, hey, we'll help. We're just like you. And the Jews who returned said, no, you're not. We don't need your help. Get out of here. That was the Samaritans. And then the Samaritans started causing all kinds of problems in the construction of the new temple and eventually decided, okay, nuts to you, we're going to go build our own temple. That's what we're talking about here. They go up to Mount Gerizim and build a photocopy of the temple that is being built at the same time down in Jerusalem. Back to Josephus. After he had beaten his enemies, this is Darius, for not he only, but also those who were in Asia also were persuaded that the Macedonians would not so much as come to battle with the Persians on account of their multitude. In other words, there were so many Persians that the Greeks wouldn't dare attack this vast Persian army. And then Josephus says, but the event proved otherwise than they expected. In other words, the pundits got it wrong. You believe the pundits way back then got it wrong, just like pundits today get it wrong? But the event proved otherwise than expected, for the king joined battle with the Macedonians and was beaten and lost a great part of his army. So we're talking about Darius III lost a whole bunch of his army, and Alexander just ran roughshod over them. His mother also and his wife, this is the wife and mother of Darius III, and his children were taken captives, and he fled into Persia. So he let his family go into captivity, and he hightailed it back home with his tail between his legs. So Alexander came into Syria and took Damascus, and when he had obtained Sidon, he besieged Tyre when he sent an epistle, a letter, to the Jewish high priest to send to him some auxiliaries and to supply his army with provisions. So Alexander is telling the priest down in Jerusalem, hey, pony up, give me some supplies, and we'll be cool about this whole thing. So what's going on is this is the battle area where Darius III got his tail kicked, his family captured, and he hightails it back over the Euphrates and is heading back down here. Meanwhile, Alexander, his conquest is into Syria, takes Damascus, and now he's basically going down what's called the Via Maris, the road of the sea. And he's capturing cities as he's going down along here. Cities like Tyre and Sidon. And that what he presents formally sent to Darius, he would now send to him, and chose the friendship of the Macedonians, and that he should never repent of so doing. But the high priest answered the messengers that he had given his oath to Darius not to bear arms against him, and he said that he would not transgress this while Darius was in the land of the living. So the priest, the high priest in Jerusalem, is telling Alexander the Great, sorry, I made a pledge to Darius III, and as long as Darius III is alive, I'm going to hold to that promise. One would go, he's not very politically smart, right? I mean, that's where you might end up. But this story gets really good. Upon hearing this answer, how do you think Alexander responds? He's not happy. Right? It says that right up there. He's not happy, right? He's very angry. And though he determined not to leave Tyre, which was just ready to be taken, yet as soon as he had taken it, he threatened that he would make an expedition against the Jewish high priest and through him teach all men to whom they must keep their oaths. In other words, as soon as I get Tyre under my belt, I'm heading to Jerusalem, and things are not going to go well for this high priest. I'm going to make an example of him so people will know you don't turn your back on Alexander the Great. So here's the siege of Tyre, Damascus. He ends up, though, skipping Jerusalem and does a siege of Gaza. So he stays along the path down here because it's real easy on that path with a big army, especially if you get chariots and all that kind of stuff, which he had. Much more difficult to go up the mountain range and into Jerusalem. So he's just clipping off everything along here and ends up taking over Gaza, which is the same Gaza that we're hearing about in the news today. Same location. So when he had, with a good deal of pains during the siege, taken Tyre and had settled its affairs, in other words, killed everybody that was in leadership that opposed him, that's kind of settling the affairs, he came to the city of Gaza, besieged both the city and him that was governor of the garrison, whose name was Babemeses. So again, he's down here, the seas of Gaza. But Sanballat, remember him, he's clear up in Samaria, and he's a Darius III loyalist, right? But Sanballat thought he had now gotten a proper opportunity to make his attempt. So he renounced Darius. Easy to do because Darius has got his tail between his legs and is running back to Persia. And taking with him 7,000 of his own subjects, he comes to Alexander. This is almost comical. And finding him beginning the siege of Tyre, he says to him that he can deliver up to him these men who came out of places under his dominion and did gladly accept of him for their lord instead of Darius. In other words, he says, I'm loyal to you. I've always been loyal to you, and I'm going to find all the culprits, and we're going to take care of them. So when Alexander received him kindly, Sanballat thereupon took courage. So he's like, okay, I'm in. I got this Alexander guy. And spake to him about his present affair. He told him that he had a son-in-law, Manasseh, not the same Manasseh that all the tribes are named after. This is a much later guy, who was a brother of the high priest, Jaddua, and that there were many others of his own nation now with him that were desirous to have a temple in the places subject to him. So in other words, Alexander has taken over the Samaritan region, and Sanballat says, hey, we'd like a temple. That it would be, listen to this, he says, I want to build a temple, but it'll be for the king's advantage to have the strength of the Jews divided into two parts. So we got the Jews up in Samaria and the Jews down in Judea. And having two separate worship places, you'll have us divided and we'll be weak and you can control us. Anybody wonder what's going on? Well, hang into this. This is almost comical. Lest when the nation is of one mind and united upon any attempt for innovation, it proved troublesome to kings that it formerly proved to the kings of Assyria. Yeah, they just destroyed the northern kingdom. It was a big problem for the kings of Assyria. Whereupon Alexander gave Sanballat leave so to do. So go ahead, sure, why not? Who used the utmost diligence and built the temple and made Manasseh the priest and deemed it a great reward that his daughter's children should have that dignity. But when the 7-month siege of Tyre was over and the 2-month siege of Gaza, Sanballat died. Okay? So he's building this temple on Mount Gerizim, and he's the guy that negotiated all this with Alexander the Great. Now, Alexander, when he had taken Gaza, made haste to go up to Jerusalem. So Alexander's like, I'm going to go teach this high priest something right now. And Judah, the high priest, when he heard that, was in agony. In other words, oh, I didn't think this through well. Where's Darius when you need him, right? And under terror, not knowing how he should meet the Macedonians, since the king was displeased at his foregoing disobedience. And so, in other words, he's got nothing. I mean, he's got no army, he's got nothing. And here comes Alexander, and he ticked him off, and he's defeated everything that he's run into. I'm toast. So here again, he's coming up from Gaza, heading up to Jerusalem, and Alexander has all of his arsenal focused right on Jerusalem right now. I mean, he's just going to blitz it. He therefore ordained that the people, so this is what the priests did, should make supplications, should join him in offering sacrifices to God, whom he besought to protect the nation and to deliver them from the perils that were coming upon them. Whereupon God warned him in a dream which came upon him after he'd offered sacrifice, that he should take courage and adorn the city and open the gates. So the high priest has this dream that God says, don't worry about it, I've got it. Decorate, the town with welcome Alexander signs. You're our hero. We've been looking forward to this moment when you can come. And just open the gates. Don't make him siege the city of Jerusalem. Just welcome him in. That the rest appear in white garments. So white garments of, purity or I don't know what the white would mean to them. But anyway, but that he and the priests should meet the king in the habits proper to their order, so get on your full priestly garb, without the dread of any ill consequences which the providence of God would prevent. So God's saying, go out, meet him, don't try to disguise yourself and look phony. You come out as who you are, welcome him in, I'm going to take care of it.
Dirk?
Yeah.
So do you think that God really told him this, or is he making it up?
I don't know. If what Josephus is telling us is true, I believe God told him, because what transpires is nothing short of miraculous. Upon which, when he rose from his sleep, greatly rejoiced, and declared all the warning that he had received from God, according to which the dream he acted entirely, and so waited for the coming of the king. And when he understood that he was not far from the city, he goes out in procession. So he's not hiding behind the walls. The gates are wide open, and he goes out to meet him as Alexander's coming up the road with the priests and a multitude of citizens. The procession was venerable, in other words, amazing, and the manner of it different from that of other nations. So other nations, when Alexander shows up, you bar the doors and you hunker down and you get ready for a siege, like what happened in Tyre and Gaza, and ticked off Alexander. And Alexander's already told this guy, I'm taking you out. And all of a sudden, here he comes, just waltzing down the road in his full gear, so you know who he is, and got all the people walking with him, and they're not terrified. It reached a place called Sapha. I could not find this. I wanted to find this. I couldn't find it. Which name, translated into Greek, signifies a prospect. For you have thence a prospect both of Jerusalem and of the temple. In other words, they met at a place where things were going to go one way or another, hopefully positive. And when the Phoenicians and the Chaldeans that followed him, so the Chaldeans might have been some remnants of Darius III's army, who knows? They're coming and they go, oh, this is going to be great. The gate's wide open. We know how that goes, because that's what happened to Babylon when the Persians showed up, right? We are going to have a high time just looting Jerusalem and stealing all their gold and stuff. Thought they should have liberty to plunder the city and torment the high priest to death, because Alexander's already ticked off at him, which the king's displeasure fairly promised them. The very reverse of it happened. For Alexander, when he saw the multitude at a distance in white garments, while the priests stood clothed with fine linen, and the high priest in purple and scarlet clothing with his mitre on his head, so he's got his hat on, having the gold plate on which the name of God was engraved, so he was wearing the breastplate that the high priest wears. He approached by himself and adorned that name and first saluted the high priest. So Alexander salutes the high priest. The Jews also did all together with one voice, salute Alexander, and encompass about him, whereupon the kings of Syria and the rest were surprised at what Alexander had done, and supposed him disordered in his mind. He's nuts, yeah. You're supposed to take this guy out. What are you doing? However, Parmenio, and I had to look him up, Parmenio was one of his lieutenants or one of his generals, fought with his dad and also then fought with Alexander. So this is a trusted friend. So Parmenio alone goes up to Alexander and says, "What in the world are you doing? That when all the others adorned him, that he should adore the high priest of the Jews." To whom he replied, "I did not adore him, but that God who honored him with that high priesthood. For I saw this very person in a dream, in this very habit, dressed like this, when I was at Dios in Macedonia." Again, I couldn't find Dios at some place where Alexander was. Alexander had a dream that happened evidently years before, where he encountered someone dressed exactly like the high priest is dressed and was told how to greet him. When I was considering with myself how I might obtain the dominion of Asia, exhorted me to make no delay, but boldly pass over the sea thither, for that he would conduct my army and would give me the dominion over the Persians. That the God who represents this guy dressed like this is going to give me victory over the Persians. Now we might look at this and go, why would a Greek do that? Well, remember, they are polytheists. So they have no problem adopting another God and just bringing them in. I mean, that's not a problem. It's a big problem, or should be a big problem, the other way around. If you're a monotheist, you should have a big problem worshiping other gods. But if you're a polytheist, no problem. You can add to that pantheon at will, whatever works out for you. So this is totally believable to me, that Alexander could respond in such a way because of his religious beliefs. Yeah, go ahead. I need to drink a swig of coffee anyway.
Would you be willing to go back to the map for a minute for me?
Absolutely. Let me see. This is slide 51. Is this the map you want?
Yeah. The reason why I'm asking to do that is I wanted to try to give you some groundwork on the geographical area and why Alexander did what he did. You know, from Tyre, as he goes down to Acco, if he was going to attack Jerusalem, he'd have to go through the mountains, and it's very dry, and he was without a lot of food. So when he didn't get his request for food, and he continued down
That makes sense.
along the ocean, he would have had more food than they could have ever consumed, because that is the rich farmland.
Right.
And so they were probably fat before they ever got to Alexandria. And then on the way back, they go back through Memphis and they go up the King's Highway, which is a very broad, flat area, and it's actually higher than Jerusalem and on the mountain itself. So the Jerusalem would have known that he was coming, and he already had the high ground. If he would have came from the other side, he would have not. He would have had to gone through.
Had to come right up through the
city of
highlands.
Palms, yeah, and go up north, and from the north come up. So Jerusalem's really in a fix. They really didn't have a lot of choice, in my perspective.
Plus, Alexander already held this, so they had no place to go.
They had no place to go.
Right. Now I gotta find 51. So when he had said this, Parmenio, his general friend, and had given the high priest his right hand, again, that's your sword hand, I come in peace, not wielding my sword. The priests ran along by him, and he came into the city, into Jerusalem, goes up to the temple, offered sacrifice to God. Again, I don't think Alexander would have any problem doing this. He could fit this right in. Remember, when they would capture another enemy, they would steal their gods and add them to their god power. So it's kind of what Alexander thinking he's doing here. I'm adding this god into my arsenal. According to the high priest's direction, and magnificently treated both the high priest and the priests. Get ready for the next slide. This is Josephus. And when the book of Daniel was showed him, wherein Daniel declared that one of the Greeks should destroy the empire of the Persians, he supposed that himself was the person intended. We're talking verse 3, chapter 11, the king who came to power. So imagine Alexander having this vision, heralding the high priest, worshiping and sacrificing to Yahweh, and then is showed the book of Daniel that says, this is about you. Huh? And then there are those who say, well, that couldn't have happened. And as he was then glad, that makes sense, he dismissed the multitude for the present, but the next day he called them to him, bade them ask what favors they pleased of him. Whereupon the high priest desired that they might enjoy the laws of their forefathers and might pay no tribute on the 7th year, that's that Jubilee thing. He granted all they desired, and when they entreated him that he would permit the Jews in Babylon and Media to enjoy their own laws also, he willingly promised to do thereafter what they desired. Now, after Alexander's empire, after he dies and the empire is divided, you've got Antiochus Epiphanes, who creates a law saying you can't practice your laws anymore. Well, what's going on here? They're asking Alexander the Great, can we practice our laws? And he says, yeah, go ahead. So they're practicing their laws, they're practicing their faith, which Alexander gave them permission to do, and then Antiochus, in his attempt to rip control back, says that they can't do it anymore. Yeah.
I hate to do this, but I just have one more comment.
Good, I'm glad.
He did the same thing in Egypt. Exactly the same thing. When he went to Egypt, he told them that they could worship anybody they wanted. He wasn't going to change their laws. It made it so easy for the Egyptians just to take and be able to be under control of him.
Be a part, yep. It's like he learned that from Cyrus. I mean, that's kind of how Cyrus was operating as well. Not so much the ones after him, but definitely Cyrus. And when he said to the multitude that if any of them would enlist themselves, how are we doing time-wise? Okay. In his army on this condition, that they should continue under the law of their forefathers, live according to them, he was willing to take them with him. Many were ready to accompany him in his wars. I mean, he's a kinder, gentler dictator, right? And they're like, hey, this is yeah, we'll fight for you. So when Alexander had thus settled matters at Jerusalem, he led his army into the neighboring cities, and when all inhabitants to whom he came received him with great kindness, the Samaritans, so we're not done with them, who had then Shechem for their metropolis, their city situate at the Mount Gerizim, and inhabited by apostates. Apostate is someone who they look like a Jew, but they're not a Jew, okay? And they don't practice the same faith. Apostates of the Jewish nation. So where we're at Mount Gerizim, Jerusalem's down here, so we're up north. Sea of Galilee is up here. So Mount Gerizim is just about halfway between the Sea of Galilee and Jerusalem. So Up here is Galilee. That's where Jesus would have spent his time doing his ministry in Galilee. And to get to Judah, you had to go through the land of the Samaritans, right in there. This is actually an aerial footprint and photo of Mount Gerizim. And so you can see the remnants of their temple that they built up on top of Mount Gerizim. There's still like 600 Samaritans still alive, and they still gather and worship up there, on the Samaritan time of Passover, whenever that is. Yeah.
Yeah, they still sacrifice.
Still sacrifice up there?
I was talking to the high priest there, had a nice visit with him. He said that the Jews really have treated them unfairly, that they were Jewish all along, that they were not a different race or different group. They believed the same as the Jewish. Their problem was that they didn't want the Ark of the Covenant moved to Jerusalem during the time of King David.
Right.
And that's what caused the strife.
Yep. Nice segue into what comes next from Josephus. Seeing that Alexander had so greatly honored the Jews down in Jerusalem, determined to profess themselves Jews, for such is the disposition of the Samaritans. This is according to Flavius Josephus. The Samaritans really want to be Jews sometimes. For we've already elsewhere declared that when the Jews are in adversity, they deny they are of kin to them. So when things are going bad for the Jews, the Samaritans go, yeah, we're not those guys. And then they confess the truth. But when they perceive that some good fortune has befallen the Jews, they immediately pretend to have communion with them. This is from a Jewish perspective, right? Because Flavius Josephus is Jewish. They belong to them and derive their genealogy from the posterity of Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh. Yeah.
Pastor Tyler, in your psychology classes, do I assume correctly you would have heard the term referent power?
Referent power, no.
There's different levels. I learned it in my business classes when I was learning to be an accountant. There's different levels of power. The lowest level of power is just think of a boss you may have had that you don't like, but you have to do what they say just because you're the boss. So that, and I can't remember what that power. But
It's probably
means
positional power.
pretty much
something
And
like that.
there's three different levels, but the top level is referent power, where you look at that person and say, "Man, I want to be like them. They're just all that."
Right.
And that's when you really have the greatest amount of power, because you have people.
You have loyalty. Yeah.
And obviously Alexander, even though the term wouldn't have existed in his day, he sure understood the
He,
concept.
yeah, he definitely had that, yeah. Plus, he could also kick everybody's tail if he needed to, right? So accordingly, they made their address to the king. So this is Samaritans, to Alexander with splendor, and showed great alacrity in meeting him at a little distance from Jerusalem. So they're trying to duplicate everything that happened down in Jerusalem. And when Alexander had commended them, the Shechemites, because they're close to the town of Shechem, approached him, taking with them the troops that Sanballat, who's dead, by the way, had sent him, and they desired that he would come to their city and honor their temple also. Problem is, Alexander didn't have a dream about these guys, okay? So he's got to clarify. To whom he promised that when he returned, they would come to them. And when they petitioned that he would remit the tribute of the 7th year to them, because they did not now know so then, he asked who they were that made such a petition. And when they said that they were Hebrews, but had the name of Sidonians living at Shechem, he asked them again whether they were Jews. And when they said, well, not really, we're not really Jews. It was to the Jews, he said, that I granted privilege. However, when I return and I am thoroughly informed of you of this matter, I will do what I think is proper. So I'll get back to you. Basically, he's telling. And in this manner he took leave of the Shechemites, but ordered that the troops of the Sanballat should follow him into Egypt, because there he designed to give them lands, which he did a little after Thebais, when he ordered them to guard the country. Now, when Alexander was dead, the government was parted among his successors. This is what we hear in verse 3 and 4. But the temple upon Mount Gerizim remained. And if anyone were accused by those of Jerusalem of having eaten things common, unclean, or of having broken the Sabbath, or of any other crime of that like nature, he fled away to the Shechemites and said that he was accused unjustly. So, if you do something wrong in Jerusalem and they come after you, according to Josephus, you just go up to the Samaritans and say, hey, they treated me bad down there. And the Samaritans will go, oh, you poor guy, come join us. About this time, it was that Jediah, the high priest, died, and Onias, his son, took the high priesthood. This was the state of the affairs of the people of Jerusalem at this time. This is where we'll end. That is what Josephus wrote about this. Isn't that crazy that the book of Daniel shows up amid the history that it was prophesying? I find that crazy. Comments, questions? Yeah.
Judean caucus where everybody's bidding for and saying what people want to hear.
Yeah, exactly. Or here's a political opportunity. You know? Yeah, right. Yep. Exactly. It worked for them, so we'll just do the same thing and it'll work for us. Exactly. It's the same thing, yeah. Just repeats over and over and over and over. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta keep in mind, the Samaritans also did not help Israel when they were being invaded. They stayed in their mountain area, and even during the time of Jesus, they estimated 500,000 Samaritans. And the Jewish people, even during Jesus' time, refused to talk to them, trade with them, or be near them.
Didn't even want to go through Samaria. They'd go around Samaria if they could.
And when you read about Jesus in the New Testament, he said he had to go to Samaria. He had to.
Right. Not through, but to.
God said he had to go back to Jacob's well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the temple that I showed you the remnants of was destroyed by a Jewish military leader by a name of John Hyrcanus, who was a part of the group that drove out Antiochus Epiphanes, and they also attacked everyone that was in Jewish in name only, but were giving into the practice of Antiochus Epiphanes, and we'll take the Samaritans out for good measure too. So he goes up and destroys that very temple. So that exchange between Jesus and the woman at the well, I don't think was anywhere close to being friendly. Because he's a Jew, and the Jews destroyed that temple, and she's like, hey, what are you doing here? It had to be tense. Yep. Mark, you were going to say something.
Just that some of the people that, say, oh, this can't be, it's just ridiculous if you start looking at everything that backs it up. It's just like, how can you
make up this story?
Yeah, and then they say Josephus made all this up. Well, he also had a ton of documents that probably by now were long
We don't have.
Yeah. He had records and, people with more knowledge, and that was a long time ago. But the evidence to back all this up, Daniel talks about the Cedar Palace. That's been discovered.
Right.
You can go on and on and on. So I won't go on.
Absolutely. Yeah, Charlie.
So are you saying that that exchange between the woman at the well and Jesus, as portrayed, say, in The Chosen, is much more intense than that episode shows? Or is that what you would? Is that your opinion? I'm not asking.
This is the psychology side of me walking into the text, which is always dangerous because this is called eisegesis, and we're warned not to do this in seminary, but it's a lot of fun to do it. And I think it's legitimate in this case. I think this woman was incredibly suspicious of Jesus and what he was up to. Either the guy's nuts, or he's up to something. We don't trust these Jews farther than we can spit. And I don't know what he's doing here, and I don't know why he's talking to me, and something weird is going on. And so I think the conversation, she had a bite and an edge to everything she said to him until things broke that this guy's a prophet. And then all of a sudden, everything changed for her. I think the same thing is true of Martha and Jesus when Jesus comes back after Lazarus dies. I think Martha is ticked off beyond belief when she sees him, because her words are, if you'd have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. So what, Jesus?
She didn't even come out to greet him.
She?
When Jesus came back for resurrection of Lazarus, it was Martha stayed in the room.
No, Martha went out to see him. Mary stayed. But then Martha comes back and says, he wants to talk to you. Well, Jesus never said, I want to talk to her. Martha said, I tried. So you go. Mary goes out, and she says the exact same words that Martha did. So you think they had their talking points? If you'd have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. I think Mary said it a little softer than Martha did. I think Martha was just like, she was keeping her anger under the social graces, but she was ready to light into him. Yeah, exactly. Your brother will rise again. I know he'll rise again. Resurrection of the life. I am the resurrection and the life. Oh, Mary, he wants to talk to you. Right? I mean, that's basically what happened. So, all right, let's go to the word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks and praise for the power of your word. And as we examine everything wrapped around your word, it becomes overwhelming, the truth of the message that you sent to even people that aren't a part of the faith. But you use them in your redemptive march to reclaim your creation. We give you thanks and praise through the work of Jesus, our Lord and our Savior. And it's in his precious name that we pray. Amen.